Good morning, and please tell me where we are.
106A, about 5 lines in.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so we just mentioned, maybe we'll start from the third line. Kiyasa Rav Dimi Amar Mayim Rishon Hachilu Basar Chazir Achronim Hoti Ishim Mebayla. So, referencing two stories in other places that because somebody was not meticulous about washing hands before bread. So we had a story we said where the guy was selling meat to Jews and kosher meat and non-kosher meat to non-Jews, and the guy sat down for a meal. He didn't wash his hands, so the store owner thought he was not Jewish, so he ended up serving him pig. And then we had someone else who was not particular about washing hands after the meal, and we had a whole story we read at the end of yesterday that ended in a divorce. Kiyasa Ravin, he had a little bit different version. Rishonim hechilu basar nevela, achronim heragu as nefesh. No, really, the person that was not meticulous about washing hands in the beginning was, and the story ended that the guy in the beginning fed basar nevela, food that was not shechted. Achronim heragu as nefesh, and the guy that was not meticulous about washing after the meal. So it turns out it wasn't that his wife got divorced, but that the husband actually killed her. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, the simanich, a way to remember, Asar Rav Dimi, Afke, Asar Ravin, Katla. So the way to remember the story is as if it happened simultaneously or at the same time. So the first thing that happens is a divorce and then a death. And you don't divorce after death. Rather, you divorce first and then he killed her. So the way to remember it is as if they happen at the same time. Divorce comes first and death comes second. Just a siman, just a way to remember. Now, Rabbi Abba masni chadim hani v'chadim hani l'chumra. So Rabbi Abba, when he would teach this over, he was a little bit of a hybrid. He would teach each one in a more stringent way. So, basar chazir, pig, is more stringent than nevela, and killing is more stringent than divorce. That's how he would teach the story. Now, why is pig more stringent than nevela? So it's interesting. Rashi says pig has two prohibitions, doesn't say what they are. So I saw that they say that pig, it's prohibited because of pig, and nevela, non-kosher meat. Now, what's the problem? We have a concept of ein iser chalal iser, that one prohibition doesn't go on another prohibition. So how do you have pig being prohibited in both? So one answer I saw was interesting was that even the opinion that says ein iser chalal iser, that one prohibition cannot go on to another prohibition, but that's only in terms of the court down here punishing you. But when it comes to in heaven, there it does count. And let's say, for example, you're not supposed to bury a rasha next to a tzaddik, a righteous person next to a holy person. So someone who violates both of these, even though down here we can't kill him, but in heaven it still registers as two prohibitions, maybe to consider him a rasha or for other things like that. Fine. So that's that. Now, itmar chame ha'or, so water that was heated up by the fire. So Chizkiah amar notlan men le'yadayim, Rabbi Yochanan amar notlan men le'yadayim. Two opinions. Can you use that for your to wash your hands before bread? Water that was heated up by the fire, meaning very hot water. So Chizkiah says that you cannot, and Rabbi Yochanan says you could. Rabbi Yochanan sha'alti Rabbi Gamliel b'no shel Rebbe. Rabbi Yochanan says, I asked Rabbi Gamliel, the son of Rebbe, the ochel taharos, and he's someone who eats food only in a very purified state. And he told me, V'amar li, he told me, Kol Gedolei Galil, all the great rabbis of the Galilee, Osin Kain, they all wash their hands with hot water, no problemo. Now, that's water that was heated up by the fire. What about the Chame Tiveria, the famous hot springs of Tiveria? So, Chame Tiveria, Chizkiam are a not limehen liadayim. You cannot use that water for washing. Now, Chizkiah is consistent. He just told us a second ago, you can't use hot water. So these hot springs, if you're going to use it to wash your hands before bread, that's not going to be okay. You need regular water, not hot water. Aval matbilim b'hen. Sometimes when we're eating food in the purest state, or when they're eating truma, and the hands became impure, you would have to be matbilim asaydan. You have to toivel your hands. You have to put your hands in a kosher mikvah. Has to have the measurement of 40 sa'ah. So Chizki agrees when it comes to being toivel them. If there was 40 sa'ah, you can immerse them into the mikvah. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Kol Gufo Tovel Behen. You could do your entire body, but not Avalo Panav Yelav Raglav, but not your face, your hands, or your feet. Now, there's not really such a thing of being toivel, only your hands, your face, and your feet. So that's so what's it talking about? And two is, 1 second, you can do your whole body, but you can't do your face, hands, and legs. That doesn't make any sense. For sure, if your whole body can go, for sure, hands, feet, and hands, arms, face, hands, and feet, for sure can go. So what does it mean? Like this. Amar of Papa reconciles this little bit contradiction, and he says like this. Bim koman, in their place, meaning when water is attached to the springs, the kulamalo pligi, the shari. Everyone agrees that you could immerse yourself in there. The mishkal minai hu bimana, you take with a vessel, you take with a cup water from the springs. The kuli amalo pligi, the usher. Everyone's going to agree that they did not establish washing hands in hot water. So if you take with a vessel to wash your hands before bread and the water is very hot, so then that's not going to be good. That's for sure not going to be good. Now, Rashi points out that the hot springs in Tiveria are more stringent than regular water heated up by the fire, because this water just came from the springs. It never had a time where it was permitted. Water that was heated up, so it was good water, and then it was heated up. This water was hot to begin with. So water that was one time regular to temperature and then got heated up, that's a debate. At one point it was good, now it's no good. How do you do that? Water that was naturally hot, so that we're saying if you take that water from a vessel, you go to the hot springs in Tiveria on your birthright trip to Israel, and you stop by there and you take your cup and you dip it in. So that was never a moment of time that it was okay. So that everyone agrees is not going to be good. The kulam lo pligi daser. Ki pligi de paskinu bebas birta. Interesting case where you have the hot springs, then you have like a little channel of water that goes through, a little ditch. In that little ditch, there's not 40 saw that's required for a mikvah, but it's connected to the mikvah. So you have a channel that's connected to the mikvah. It itself is not a kosher mikvah, but it's continuous water flowing through there. So now the question's like this. That's their debate. That one opinion held they decreed this ditch because if we allow you to immerse yourself in that, you'll think you can fulfill your immersion by, with a vessel. It's both removed from the actual spring, so it's too easily confused. And one opinion says, no, you're not going to confuse it. A ditch is a ditch, a vessel is a vessel. A vessel, everyone knows, is not going to be good, but a ditch, they're not going to confuse it. So they did not decree that. This debate in the Amoraim is actually reflected in the earlier Tanoim, Kitanoi, Mayim shenifslu mishtias behema became psulim bekarka ksherim, water that was invalidated from drinking of an animal So meaning the water just got so gross. It got so gross that an animal wouldn't drink it, or it's just too hot. It's too hot, like the springs in Tiberia. So that water, bekalim psulin, if you use a vessel and you take that either gross water or boiling hot water, it's still going to be invalid for dipping your hands in. However, bekarka ksherin, if that water's in the ground, so that's fine. It's like there's a well-known mikvah not far from the Mir, Hasidic mikvah. They're like the nicest one in the area. So they have, I think, 3 or 4 pools. So one is very cold, 1 or 2 are lukewarm, and 1 is very hot. It's like really hot. So the karka, if it's in the ground, so then that's going to be fine. Ksherin. So Rabbi Shimon Lazar Omer af the karka toven kol gufa avalo pani raglo. So same thing as before. You could go immerse your whole body if it's in the ground. The water's in the ground, but not your face, hands, and legs. It says in hash gufa toven kol. If you can immerse your whole body, for sure you can immerse your face, hands, and feet. No. El alav, what it means is like this. Depaskinu b'basbarta. It's water that was in the ground, but there's a channel, a little ditch that water goes through called the bas birta. And they debate. So on the one hand, it's connected. On the other hand, it doesn't have 40 sa. Same as before. Can you take water from there? Can you immerse your hands and your feet in there? Yes or no. On the one hand, maybe they're both removed from the actual spring, and therefore it's fine. They won't be, and therefore it's not fine. They'll be commonly confused with a vessel. On the other hand, it's attached to the spring, and therefore it could be fine. Now, there's no such thing as immersing face and feet. That's not a thing. There's either immersing your whole body or there's immersing your hands. So Rashi says that they just used that language of pani of the ragla. They often go together. Face, hands, and feet go together. But what it means is the hands. In the times where you have to immerse your hands in the water, so does that ditch that's connected to the mikvah, will that be okay? Or that's too commonly confused with a vessel? Okay. That is that. Now here comes the $1 million question that one might have been asked. Why are you Jews so particular about washing your hands before you eat your bread? So you tell them, because we don't like to talk, and when you wash, you can't talk. So that, you don't want to hear someone speak. Right, when you got 6 people around the table, yeah, that's what you do. But no, the answer is Amar of Idi bar Aben Amar of Yitzchak bar Ashian Netilas Yadayim le Chulin. So washing hands for Chulin, for not Truma, is because Mipnei Srach Truma. Now, we know that there are different degrees of impurity. You have the Avot, the father of the fathers of Tumah, a dead body. Then you have an Avatuma. Then you have the first degree of Tumah. And then you have a second degree of Tumah. Now, once you're at the second degree of Tumah, other than Truma or sacrificial foods or animals, you cannot contaminate anything. The only thing that becomes a third degree is going to be Truma or Kodesh. That's it. And fourth degree is Kodesh. And those are both rabbinic. So that's one. Number 2 is that they made a decree that hands, so to speak, have a mind of their own. They're around touching things the whole day. So we treated one of the decrees. There was 18 decrees in the beginning of Masechah Shabbos that Beis Hillel Shammai enacted. So one of them is that they treat your hands like a second degree of Tumah. Because the hands are always around touching things, they're a second degree of Tumah. Now, second degree can only make something which is Truma a third degree. So just because my hands are second degree and I touch a regular piece of bread, nothing happens. But if I were to touch a piece of Truma or a liquid of Truma, then it would become contaminated. So because there were people, there was a time in our history that people were very, very careful in Truma, and we wanted to keep that as pure as possible. So therefore, we said that that we had everybody wash their hands, even when they were eating regular bread, because we wanted to make sure that before you eat truma, you would your hands would be clean. This was to ensure when you sit down for a meal, bread is the primary part of the meal. That's the staple. So of the food. So therefore, you would wash your hands to make sure the hands are always going to be pure. And even though we are not meticulous about the truma eating nowadays, but the enactment remained. Now that's only one step. That is mipnei srach truma. The od mishum mitzvah, and also because of a mitzvah. Now, very interesting. What's the mitzvah? My mitzvah. Amar Abaye, mitzvah lishmoa divrei chachamim. It's a mitzvah, asks Parsha, to listen to the rabbis. So it's an interesting thing why you have these two. On the one hand, they enacted because of truma, and also because of a mitzvah. Yeah. So Abaye says the mitzvah is the mitzvah to listen to the rabbis. Rava said the mitzvah is something else. It's going to be that we're going to have a hint to it in the Torah, this idea of washing. Rava it's a mitzvah to listen to Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, who expounded the following verse. It says by a zav. Anybody who touches a zav, or really a zav touches them, and didn't wash his hands in water, so that's a problem. Amar Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, mikan socha. From here, the rabbis saw they relied on here that they saw a hint in the Torah, l'netilas yadayim min haTorah, to washing the hands from the Torah. Amar Rabbi Rav Nachman, ma'im mashal. Where do you see from here such a concept? You didn't put your hands in the water. Oh, but if you did, it would be pure. Hashatav tahor. So hashatav tahor. If you would immerse them in the water, it would be pure. It says hatvila boy. You need immersion, not taking with a vessel and washing. You have to immerse them. El hakamar v'akar shelo shatav tameh. Someone else who did not. So meaning someone who touches a zav, or someone who doesn't immerse their hands, they're both going to be tameh. One second. The Gemara said that if a zav touches someone, that they're going to be impure if they don't immerse their hands. But what if they immerse their hands, then they're going to be pure when the zav touched them? No, what it means is someone who touches a zav or someone who does not immerse their hands, both of those people are considered impure. Both the guy who touches the zav and the guy who doesn't immerse his hands, they're both impure. So you see someone who doesn't immerse their hands is considered impure, and therefore we wash our hands to be pure. So two opinions exactly what the mitzvah is. Either it's because a mitzvah to listen to the rabbis, or because it's a mitzvah, meaning they saw here that a person who doesn't wash hands is considered impure. Now, this is going back a very long time, so I don't know if it's 100% accurate about to say, but I think it is. I think the Mishnah Berurah seems to imply this, but maybe the Rishonim imply it, is that if it was just the first reason that we want to make sure your hands are pure, I don't know if you'd make a bracha on that. A bracha usually is not made on things to meaning a removal of bad. So the removal of tumah, not always, sometimes. So in this case, they made your hands impure because they were very dirty. Or they might touch impurity. So for cleanliness, we wouldn't make a bracha. Once it's a mitzvah, for a mitzvah, you would make a bracha. Mitzvah to listen to the rabbis, or mitzvah to immerse your hands. then you would make a blessing. But just to, for example, we'd make a blessing on mayim achronim, right? Because that's more of a removing salt from your hands. The removal of something ichi, whether it's dirty or whether it's impure, doesn't usually necessitate a blessing. You need something positive to necessitate a blessing. We can ask a question on that because, let's say Nida, she does make a blessing. She's becoming pure. Okay, I don't know. Either way, that's the reason why we wash our hands. Two reasons: to keep our hands pure from truma, and because of the mitzvah, either mitzvah to listen or mitzvah that we found in the Torah, a hint to this idea that if it's not pure, if it's not washed, it's not pure. But if it'll be washed, it'll be pure. Amar Rabbi Lazar, Amar Rabbi Oshia, Amar Nikios Dayan Lepeiros Elam Mishum Nikios. Rabbi Lazar said in the name of Rabbi Oshia, when it came to washing hands for fruits, if you heard in yeshiva such a thing, it says that's just for cleanliness. Be hygienic. Don't wash fruits with dirty hands. Savramina, they understood that to mean chovahu. It's obligatory to wash hands before fruits. Savramina chovahu like if there's no obligation, but mitzvah ika, but there's a mitzvah. So there's no obligation, but it's a good thing to do. Amar lehu Rava lo chovahu mitzvah ela reshus. It's not obligated. It's not. You're not obligated. It's not a mitzvah to do. Rather, it is a reshus. It is voluntary. And this is a debate with Upligator of Nachman. Rav Nachman said, "Amar Nachman the pairs eino elam migasei ruach." Someone who washes his hands for fruits is a haughty person. Yeah, he's full of himself. Why? The halacha says you wash your hands for bread. He comes along and says, "I'm going to do it for fruit too." So you're full of yourself. You think you know better than the halacha, and you're more stringent. So that's also a problem. Yeah. So Amar Rabbi Barachana, Havi Kamina Kamei Rabbi Ami. I was in front of Rabbi Ami Varavasi. I saw the Kamayo Kikul of the Peri. They brought a basket of fruits. The Achlu V'lo Mashudayu, and they ate and did not wash. For Lo Yavu Le Midi, and they didn't give me any. They didn't give any fruit. Meaning, they had three. Or maybe I was eating fruit, but they didn't include me in their zimun. Okay. So that's one. One second. Hava Kamei Rabbi Rabasi. Aisuli Kamayu, they brought before them. The Achlu, they ate. They did not below Masha, they did not wash hands. Below Yahobu Li Midi. No, they didn't give me any. Right. They didn't give me any. Below Yahobu Li, they didn't give me any. So, which Rashi means that they didn't count me as part of their zimun. Ubarich chad chad lechudei, and each person made their own blessing on their own. So, Shma Mina Tlat. I learned three things from here. Shma Mina Einyan heals down the pairs. I see from here that you don't wash your hands for fruits. Vishma Mina Ein Mezamnin Al HaPeros. And I learned from here that there's no zimun, there's no getting together, making a zimun, a blessing together. Rabbis, let's bench on fruit. Vishan, and the third thing I learned was Shnayim Sha'achlu Mitzvah Lechalik. When two people eat together, Mitzvah Lechalik is each one should bench on their own, should make after on their own. Not one person would cover the other person's blessing. Tanya Nami a similar brisa, a brisa to support this says, Shnayim Sha'achlu Mitzvah Lechalik. Two people that eat together, it's a mitzvah too. Each one benches on their own. The only time you bench on your own is if both people know the benching. If each one knows how to bench, so then you would bench on your own. But if one guy is a sofer, we're referring to a scholar, meaning someone who knows how to bench, and one person's a total ignoramus, it does not know how to bench, so then, of course, the one who knows how to bench should exempt the one who does not know how to bench. Now, how far do you wash your hands? So we're going to have three things. On your hand, you have four levels. Joint 1, joint 2, knuckles, and wrist. Yeah, 4 areas. Joint 1, joint 2, knuckles and wrist. So, Tanu Rabbanan, netilas yadayim lechulin, washing hands for chulin is ad ha-perik. Is until ad ha-perik. Is until the perik. I think on the next page, yeah. Rashi says ad ha-perik is the second joint. The second joint. Yeah. Letruma, if you're washing letruma, it's ad ha-perek, which is the second joint. Kiddush yadayim v'raglayim b'mikdash, washing your hands and feet in the base of mikdash. Sorry, the truma's ad ha-perek, but it's the next perek. We're going up. So washing your hands for bread is the second joint. The one right before the knuckles. Washing for truma is the knuckles. Washing in the temple is going to be the wrist. The kol davar shechotetz betfila beguf chotetz ben yosidayim lechulin. Anything which would cause an interposition that's not going to be good for immersion is not going to be good for washing either. Yeah. And it'll also be an interposition if you are washing your hands and feet in the temple. So whatever is going to count as an interposition for immersion in the mikveh will count as also a problem when you wash your hands or when you wash them in the temple. Yeah. Now there's another version of the Gemara that the Rif brings. That really, when it's said for chulin, it didn't mean joint 2. Either I forget he had the knuckles or he had the wrist. The other version had 1 second, sorry. Okay, yeah, we'll see. We'll see. That's coming up now. Okay, fine. So, Amar Rav, Ad Kan L'Chulin, Ad Kan L'Truma. So, says Rav, he pointed, until here for Chulin, until here for Truma. Ushmul Amar Ad Kan Bein L'Chulin, Bein L'Truma L'Chumra. Rav Sheish Amar Ad Kan Bein L'Chulin, Bein L'Truma L'Kula. So, Rav says, up until here is good enough for Chulin, and up until here is good enough for Truma. So, Rashi says, just like I just explained to you, which means that Rav said up until the second joint is good for washing for bread, up until the knuckle is good for truma. That was Rav. Now, Shmuel said, Ad kan bein l'chulin, bein l'truma lechumra. So here we go. This is really the beginning of what we do, is that Shmuel said both of them are stringent. Even the washing from regular bread should be the same as truma lechumra, which means up to the knuckles. Rav Sheshes Amar Ad Kan Bein L'Chulin Truma L'Kula, the other way. Even truma can be the second joint. Amar Barhed Barhedya have a kamina kamed Rabami. Barhedya was standing in front of Rabami. The Amar Ad Kan Bein L'Chulin and Bein L'Truma L'Chumra. Up until here is both for mundane, for bread, and for truma is L'Chumra, meaning up to the knuckles. Below Tam Rabbi Amim Mishum the Kohen. It's not because he was a Kohen, he was so stringent. The Rav Meisha Bar Braid Rav Yoshe ben Levi who, and Braid Rav Yeshua ben Levi, who Levi, he was a Levi. The Amr Ad Kan Bein the Truma L'Chumra. He also said, even though he's not a Kohen, that he had to be stringent up until the knuckles. Now the Rif has another version of the Gemara where it comes out that the stringency is up to the wrist. So it comes out that it's a machlokas Rashi and the Rif. Do you wash your hands up to the knuckle, or do you wash your hands up to the wrist? So the halacha is we're stringent to do it up to the wrist. So when you wash your hands for challah, you should wash with a vessel up until the wrist. Now, If you wash up until the knuckle and you didn't go to the wrist, that's fine because that's what Rashi holds. Or if you're stuck and you don't have so much water, up until the knuckles is also fine. But ideally, it's so easy to be stringent, so one should go up until the wrist, and that comes from here, different versions of this Gemara. Amar Rav, notel adam es shtei yadav, shachris umasna alein kolyam kula. This is very interesting. So a person knows that they're going on a trip, and they're not going to find water. And the only lunch they're going to have that day is their tuna sandwich. So the question is, every Jew has washing phobia. They do anything not to wash, right? So what do? I want to eat my bread, but I'm not going to have water next to me. So it says the Gemara, Amar Rav, no to adam eshtei yadav, shachris, umasna aleim kolyam kula. You could, in the morning when you wake up and you wash your hands in the morning, you could stipulate, let this washing be the washing for the day. And it'll cover you for your washing for bread. Now, first of all, they point out a very interesting thing is that, one second, the whole reason we established washing hands is because hands have a mind of their own, they're going to touch things. But if you're going to be careful the whole day and not touch things because you want to wash for bread, why do you need a stipulation? Either make sure your hands are clean, you wear gloves the whole day. You'll make sure your hands don't touch anything that they shouldn't be touching. Nothing dirty, nothing impure. What does the stipulation have to do with anything? Why did it stipulate? That they point out that you see from here that washing hands for bread needs special intent. You can't just keep them clean. You have to wash with intent that it's going to cover your washing of the bread. The other problem is, which I don't have time to figure it out, is usually we're pretty strict about between the washing and the bread, you can't have a break, right? You talk or something, you have to go wash again. So you're washing 9 a.m. and you're on a road trip, like Dayton's to Montana, right? So you wash in Portland and you end up in who knows where 10 hours later, Idaho or Montana, however long it takes. And you can just eat your bread. What happened to this whole break you have in the middle? That's the other question that they asked. Yeah. Yeah, okay, they give different answers. Fine. Either way, that's what Rav says, that you can wash your hands and you can make a stipulation. Now, but it's only if you keep them clean. If you go the other way, I stipulate that this is going to count for my bread. And then you get them dirty or you get them impure, and then that day you go make a minyan in the cemetery, that's not going to help you. They have to be clean with a stipulation. Okay. Amar Lahu Rabbi Avina Libnei Pikta de Arvus. So says Rabbi Avina told them, who's them? The Bnei Piksa de Arvus. There's a valley way in the place called Arvus, and he told them like this: Kigon asun like them delo shchichi lehu maya. They don't have so much water. So Moshe Yadaychu Mitafra. They don't have so much water, so therefore they can make a stipulation and it'll count. Some say in so Rav said you could do this even if you have water. This version is saying only if you're stuck. You're in a pickle with no water. Then you can make the stipulation, meaning, is the stipulation only one to use when you're stuck or even when you're not stuck? So if it's when you're stuck, that argues on Rav. Or another version is that you can even do the stipulation like Rav, even when it's not, dire straits, and therefore it'd be like Rav. So two versions did what he said agree to Rav or disagree with Rav. Okay. Now, another rule is another rule is something called koach gavra. Koach is power, strength. Gavra is a human. That the water you use for Netilas Yadayim has to come from human force. So you got to turn the sink on. You have to pour the cup onto your hand. So it has to come as opposed to let's see. So Amar Rav Papa, Hai Arisa de Deloy, Ain Not Lemimenu Liadayim Delo Asumi Koach Gavra. Says Rav Papa, this Arisa de Deloy. So this Arisa de Deloy is a channel of water that the water would go there from the Yaor, from the riverbanks, with a bucket, and this channel would take the water to the fields. So now, let's say a person goes and pours the water from the river into this channel. So let's say you're starting over here and you pour the water in, and then it's flowing down, and you meet the water half a mile in. That water right now is way too disconnected from when that person poured in the bucket. So that we don't see that as coming from koach gavra. We don't connect those two, that it's coming from the person who poured it in. That's too far removed. So that's not coming mikoach gavra, because koach gavra is that right when you take the cup and you pour it, right there, that water that's called koach gavra, directly coming. That water going onto my hand is coming from me pouring it on. So, for example, I've done this many times. When you're stuck with no cup, you fly somewhere, and you want to wash your hands because you took a red eye, especially Portland to New York. You take a red eye. So what do? So you go to the bathroom. So you turn the sink on, then you turn it off, then you turn it on, then you turn it off. So you do one, in the morning, because that water is coming from my koach gavra. I turn it on, it goes. But the other hand now, when the water keeps flowing, that's not from my strength anymore. That's from the next flow already. So it's not just getting it started. That's not the point. The point is that you have to actually has to come from that strength. So that first burst of water from the sink comes from that. Now, on El Al now, when I was on El Al, so they actually chained in the bathroom on the airplane. They chained a little washing cup onto the sink. Well, that was very helpful. So you usually have to press that button and then wait, and then it stops, and press it again, and then you're there, and then all of a sudden you start hearing. No, I'm kidding. But the point is that's the koach gavra. So this channel of water going from the riverbanks to the fields to irrigate them, the irrigation system. So you put your hands in over there. That's not called koach gavra. Charles, you 5 minutes early. Yeah, that happened. So ain't nothing le'adayim. Delo asmi koach gavra. Now, the mikarev legabe dula, if you bring close, not the lady that helps a woman give birth, a dula, but legabe dula, the cosmic gavra, nothing le'adayim. If you take a bucket, and you put your hand, and then you take a bucket, and then you pour the water, and your hands are nearby where that water goes into that first big goes on your hands. So then that counts as mikoach gavra. It sounds like even a big bucket, and you go and you pour it into the channel of water, and your hands are not under it, but right next to it. That water that's coming onto your hands is coming from the force of that bucket. Even that is fine. Now, the ibazia dula bit. Now, the bezia dula. So now this is a little bit of interesting architecture over here. So, bezia dula bekones mashka. So, to get a good picture for this, but you have a bucket. Now, the bucket's hole. Now, it takes very little, as we know. This is probably physics 101, right? You have a bucket with a hole, the water pours out. It'll drip out, right? So you have a hole in the boat will sink, right? So that's fine. But then you have a bigger hole that water can come in also. It's a big enough hole that water is going to go in. So what happens? You have a bucket with a big hole, and the water is going to go in. That it's enough that the water should go in. So ibazia dula bekones mashka. So melaf layif. So the water's going from the river to the banks, and you have this bucket that's big enough, that the hole is big enough that the water's coming in and coming out. So there now you put your hands into the channel of water. So there is an interesting thing that we consider as like one, it's connected to the river because of this big bucket that the hole is big enough, the water goes through and then comes out. So that's enough to view it as a connection. That flow that's going in the channel is considered one long connection from the river to the channel to your hands, and that's actually fine to wash your hands. Yeah. Rava says, though, a vessel has a hole, bikones mashka, that it's big enough that water is going to go in, that vessel you can't use. It's not a vessel. No longer a vessel. If the hole is that big, it's not a vessel. Before we were talking about connecting the river to you with a channel. So that is enough of a hole that if the water is going to go in and come out, it's considered a flow. That your hands in the water is like coming from the river, and that's fine. But if you want to use a vessel, so this comes to the question is, what happens if your vessel for an design is damaged, is ruined? At what point is it no longer a vessel? If it's no longer a vessel, then you can't wash your hands with it. So at least if it's too big that water's going to be able to go in. I don't really get, what do you mean water's going to be able to go in? A small hole, the water's not going to go in? Okay, and then what? And then put it in water. It's not gonna flow in. Got it.
The hole is this big.
Yeah.
You don't have a vessel.
Right. But what does it mean it's big enough that the water is going to go in? It means that when you have a small hole in your vessel, and you're going to put it into water, it's barely going to go in and out. Right? If you take away the bottom of the cup, the water's going to flow right through the cup and come out the other side. Right? So you have to have a hole big enough that the water is going to come in and really flow out the other side. A small hole sounds like that doesn't do the job. Something like that. No? It just means that I think water goes through and flows out normally. When the hole is so large that it allows the water to seep in, the vertical stream that runs through the hole from the pail to the can below is discernible. So thus, when he says subsequently pours the water from the pail into the ditch, there is at the same time a discernible stream flowing from the bottom of the pail to the canal. Meaning, when you have a vessel that you have a big enough hole so that water is coming from the stream into the canal. So the bigger the hole is, the more you see it as a flow. If it has one little tiny poke of a needle in it, and the water's hitting the vessel, that's not considered a one long flow through the vessel. That's all it means. So the case before was that imagine you have a big vessel, so that big vessel's water is going in, it's a big enough hole, and coming out. So now that's considered enough to be considered washing your hands. But on the other side, if you're using because that's connected to the mikvah, and a mikvah is fine for washing your hands. You can immerse your hands into a mikvah, that's also good. But if you're going to take a regular water, not from the riverbank, not the mikvah water, regular water from the sink, if the vessel has such a big hole that it would be considered a connection when the riverbank is going through it, because it flows so nicely. Why does it flow so nicely? Because the hole is so big. So that's not going to be a good for your vessel. So, yeah. A vessel has to contain a revius, so water, or else it's not considered a vessel for an atil sidayim. Ini, is that true? But hamaxik alfagav says Rava. It sounds like you need to have a revius of water. No, it needs to be able to contain a revius of water. But even if it doesn't have a revius, as long as it could contain a revius, that's enough. So that's a kasha, lo kasha, holachat, holatray. For one person, you have to have a revius. For two people, meaning the second guy's going to have the remains of the water, your big washing cup, which now has been used by the first person, and only a little bit remains to the second person, as long as it goes to the knuckle or at least the wrist. So that's going to be enough. Even though right now he does not have a revius water inside of it. The Tanya may revius notel nedaim le'echad v'afil l'shnaim. You can have a revius of water go for two people. When the first person uses it, now there's no longer a revius. True, but it at one point contained a revius, and therefore that's fine. Amarle Rav Shishit la Meimar Kapedo Kabdeso Amana. No, let's stop here. Okay.
Yeah, today.
You remember this?